The Romans had always been fascinated with Greece since the very first days of their civilization. In fact, the Romans considered the Greeks to be masters in every single field, from architecture to philosophy. They looked up to them and tried to emulate them in any way they could. However, the Romans were also ambitious, and they wanted everything for themselves, so it was only a matter of time until they decided that they wanted Greece too. This will be how Rome conquered Greece. After the destruction of Carthage, Rome found itself in a position it had never experienced before. For the first time in its history, the Romans controlled the entire Mediterranean, or at least most of it. The closest thing that they had to an equal rival was Macedonia, but they weren't even close to being Rome's equal. However, Rome would not find peace for long because at this point, Greece had become a powder keg of conflict. The Achaean League was formed by the Romans after the conquest of the Peloponnese in order to keep order in the region. But then came the Macedonian king Perseus, who took advantage of Rome's preoccupation with other issues and declared war on them. Although the Romans managed to defeat him, the damage was already done. Rome realized that Greece was now full of people who did not want to be dominated by the Romans, which is why they sent their best general to put down any potential uprising. That general was Lucius Cornelius Sulla. Sulla was one of the greatest Roman generals of all time, and he was also known for his ruthlessness. After reaching Greece, Sulla started a brutal campaign to subdue the Greek states. He laid siege to cities, destroyed villages, and massacred anyone who opposed him. His goal was clear: make an example out of Greece so no other state would ever dare to challenge Rome again. His actions would have consequences that would reverberate throughout the entire ancient world. Sulla marched his troops into Greece in 86 BC and began his campaign in Euboea. While marching through the island, he encountered some resistance from the locals, but nothing that could trouble him. He made quick work of any city that opposed him, and soon the entire island fell under his control. But there was still one city left: Athens. Athens was the birthplace of democracy and culture, and it had always prided itself on its intellectual achievements rather than its military prowess. But Sulla would change that. He laid siege to Athens and attacked the city relentlessly. The Athenians tried their best to defend themselves, but against Sulla's war machine, there was nothing they could do. And when the city fell, Sulla did not show mercy. He executed many of the city's leaders and destroyed its infrastructure. With Athens subdued, Sulla moved on to other parts of Greece. He continued to pillage and destroy cities, and soon he had the entire region under his control. One of the last cities to fall was Corinth. Corinth was a major city in Greece and had been a thorn in Rome's side for many years. It was also home to a large number of intellectuals who had fled Athens after Sulla's attack. But against the Roman war machine, they were no match. And when the city fell, Sulla once again showed no mercy. He executed many of the city's leaders and destroyed its infrastructure. Corinth was now just another city in the Roman Empire, and Greece was effectively under Roman control. But this victory came at a great cost. Thousands of Romans and Greeks alike had been killed, and much of Greece had been destroyed. However, Sulla was not done yet. He knew that there were still some pockets of resistance in the region, and he set about crushing them. He returned to Italy a hero, and the Senate rewarded him by granting him the title of Imperator. This title was usually reserved for generals who had defeated a major enemy. But in this case, it was given to Sulla because he had essentially conquered a whole new region for Rome. The Greeks were shocked by the ferocity of the Romans. They had never seen a people so brutal and unrelenting, and they were horrified by what had happened to their cities and their people. However, they knew that they could not resist the Roman war machine, and so they submitted to the inevitable. The Roman conquest of Greece was a watershed moment in the history of both civilizations. For the Romans, it marked the beginning of their transformation from a small Italian city-state to a Mediterranean superpower. And for the Greeks, it marked the end of their golden age and the beginning of their decline. In the wake of the Roman conquest, Greece became a province of the Roman Empire, and the Greek people were subjected to Roman rule. The Romans implemented a number of changes in Greece, including the introduction of Latin as the official language and the establishment of Roman law. These changes were unpopular with the Greek people, who saw them as a threat to their identity and their way of life. As a result, there was a great deal of resentment towards the Romans, which would simmer for centuries. Despite the resentment, the Roman conquest of Greece had some positive effects. The province of Greece was relatively prosperous and enjoyed a high standard of living compared to other parts of the empire. Additionally, the Romans were tolerant of Greek culture and allowed it to flourish. In fact, the Romans were even known to have admired Greek art and literature. This led to a period of cultural exchange between the two civilizations, which resulted in a number of great works of art and literature. One of the most famous examples of this cultural exchange is the Roman statesman Cicero's philosophical dialogue, The Republic. The dialogue is a conversation between several Roman senators about the nature of the ideal state and the best form of government. Cicero uses the Greek concept of the polis, or city-state, as the basis for his discussion, and he draws heavily on Greek philosophy, particularly the works of Plato and Aristotle. Cicero's work shows how Greek ideas had an important influence on Roman thought, and how the Romans were able to adapt Greek ideas to their own culture. Another example of this cultural exchange can be seen in the art of the Hellenistic period. During this period, Greek and Roman artists worked together to create a new style of art that combined the best elements of both cultures. This style is characterized by its realism and its focus on human emotions and relationships. One of the most famous examples of Hellenistic art is the sculpture Laocoon and His Sons, which depicts the Trojan priest Laocoon and his sons as they are entangled by sea serpents. The sculpture is famous for its dramatic pose and its expression of pain and suffering. The Roman conquest of Greece had a profound impact on the course of Western civilization. It brought together two great civilizations, each with its own unique culture and traditions. The Romans and the Greeks learned from each other and shared their knowledge and ideas, which led to some of the greatest works of art and literature in the ancient world. But it also created a deep-seated resentment among the Greeks, who felt that their culture and way of life were being threatened by the Romans. This resentment would simmer for centuries and eventually boil over, leading to the decline of the Roman Empire and the rebirth of Greece. When Julius Caesar was assassinated, the Roman Republic descended into chaos. The assassination also created a power vacuum in the province of Greece, which was quickly filled by Octavian, Caesar's adopted son. Octavian, who would later become the first emperor of Rome, was eager to assert his authority in Greece, and he began by putting down a rebellion in the province of Asia. Once the rebellion was crushed, Octavian turned his attention to Greece, where he faced a more serious challenge. Several Roman legions stationed in Greece had proclaimed the governor of Cisalpine Gaul, Marcus Junius Brutus, as emperor. Brutus was one of the assassins of Julius Caesar, and he had fled to Greece after Caesar's death. Octavian was determined to crush the rebellion and restore order to the province. He marched his troops into Greece and engaged the rebel legions in battle. The fighting was fierce, but Octavian's forces were ultimately victorious, and the rebellion was crushed. Octavian's victory in Greece was a turning point in the struggle for power after Caesar's assassination. It demonstrated Octavian's military prowess and his ability to maintain order in the Roman Empire. It also established Octavian's authority in the province of Greece, which would later become an important part of his empire. After defeating the rebellion in Greece, Octavian went on to defeat his rival, Mark Antony, in a civil war, and emerged as the sole ruler of the Roman Empire. Under his rule, the empire reached a period of peace and prosperity known as the Pax Romana. The province of Greece also flourished during this period and became an important center of trade and culture. Rome's conquest of Greece is a significant event in ancient history, and its impact can still be felt today. The cultural exchange between Rome and Greece led to some of the greatest works of art and literature in the ancient world. But the conquest also created a deep-seated resentment among the Greeks, who felt that their culture and way of life were being threatened. This resentment would simmer for centuries and eventually boil over, leading to the decline of the Roman Empire and the rebirth of Greece. Thank you very much for watching. And if you like the video, please consider supporting us. See you next time.